Commander Kyle Morrison stood in front of the big screen on his ship, the Celestial Dawn. He watched the battle recordings for the third time that week. Something was very wrong, but he could not figure out what. The enemy was running away, not just once, but every single time they saw humans with a special badge on their uniforms. The badge showed they were animal handlers, people who worked with trained creatures. Kyle did not understand why this scared the Vraken so much. The Vraken were tough fighters. They looked like giant lizards that walked on two legs. They had sharp teeth, claws, and thick scales that could stop bullets. For 5 years, humanity had fought them across a dozen star systems. The Vraken were winning most battles. But now something had changed. "Show me the Kepler station fight again," Kyle said to Lieutenant Grace Hamilton. She sat at the control panel, her fingers moving across the touchscreen. The recording played. Kepler station was a small outpost near the edge of human space. The Vraken had attacked with 3 warships and hundreds of their special weapons. These weapons were called combat cubs. They were young Vraken, bred and trained to fight from birth. The cubs grew fast, reaching full size in just a few months. They were strong, mean, and fearless. In the recording, the combat cubs swarmed over Kepler station like angry insects. They tore through metal walls with their claws. They bit through power cables. The station's defenders were losing badly. Then a small human transport ship arrived. It carried only 20 people. All of them wore the handler badge. The moment the Vraken commander detected the handlers, everything changed. The enemy ships turned around and left. The combat cubs stopped fighting and looked confused. Within 5 minutes, the entire Vraken force had retreated. "They were winning," Grace said. "We counted over 200 combat cubs on that station. Our people had maybe 15 minutes before complete defeat. Then we show up with handlers and they just leave." Kyle rubbed his tired eyes. He had not slept well in days. "It makes no sense. Handlers are not soldiers. Most of them are not even armed. What are the Vraken afraid of?" "Maybe they think we have some new weapon," Grace suggested. "Then why do they only run when they detect handlers? We have plenty of new weapons. They do not care about those." Kyle turned away from the screen. "Get me Admiral Patricia Cross and find Dan Cooper. If anyone knows what is happening, it is him." Dan Cooper was special. He had been a prisoner of the Vraken for 18 months. They had captured him during a raid and taken him to one of their breeding facilities. These facilities were where the Vraken raised their combat cubs. Dan had been forced to work there, cleaning the pens and feeding the young creatures. When human forces finally rescued Dan, he came back different. He was quiet and had bad dreams, but he also came back with knowledge. He understood how the Vraken raised their cubs. More importantly, he understood that the cubs were not just weapons. They were living things that could think and feel. Dan had started a program. He called it the Handler Corps. The idea was simple. When humans captured Vraken cubs during battles, they would not kill them. Instead, they would try to train them, the same way people trained dogs or horses back on Earth. Most military officers thought Dan was crazy. But Admiral Patricia Cross gave him permission to try. She gave him resources, a small facility, and a team of volunteers. That was 8 months ago. Now Kyle was starting to think that Dan's crazy idea might be the key to winning the war. Dan arrived at the command center 20 minutes later. He looked tired. His uniform was wrinkled and he had dark circles under his eyes. He had been working long hours since the pattern of Vraken retreats began. "Commander," Dan said, giving a casual salute. "You wanted to see me?" "I need you to explain something," Kyle said. He pointed at the screen, which now showed a map of recent battles. Red dots marked places where the Vraken had retreated. There were 12 red dots. Every single one of these battles ended the same way. The Vraken were winning. Then they detected our handlers. Then they ran away. Why? Dan looked at the map for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Because they are afraid of what we are doing to their children." "Their weapons, you mean?" Grace corrected. "No," Dan said firmly. "Their children. That is the whole point. The Vraken treat the cubs like bullets in a gun. Use them up and make more. But cubs are not bullets. They are young creatures with brains and feelings. When I was in that breeding facility, I learned something important. The cubs can be kind. They can be gentle. They can even love if someone shows them love first." Kyle felt confused. What does love have to do with military retreats? Dan walked over to the screen and touched it. A new image appeared. It showed a Vraken cub about the size of a large dog. The cub had gray-green scales and large yellow eyes. A human woman in a handler uniform was kneeling next to it, checking its teeth. "This is Zephyr," Dan said. "We captured him during a raid 8 months ago. He was 3 weeks old. The Vraken had already started his combat training. According to their methods, he should have tried to kill us the moment we touched him. But he did not." "No, why?" "Why?" Kyle asked. "Because we were nice to him. We fed him good food. We gave him a clean place to sleep. We talked to him in gentle voices. We treated his wounds. Within 1 week, he stopped trying to bite us. Within 2 weeks, he started following his handler, that woman right there. Her name is Lisa Yang. Within a month, he was learning commands, not because we hurt him when he did wrong, but because we rewarded him when he did right." Grace leaned forward, interested now. "One cub does not explain fleet-wide retreats." "You're right," Dan agreed. "One cub does not explain it. But we do not have just one cub. We have 47 now. Every single one has bonded with a human handler. Every single one is healthier, stronger, and smarter than the cubs the Vraken produce. And here is the important part. The cubs talk to each other." Kyle felt a chill run down his back. "Talk? You mean they have language?" "Not language like we use," Dan explained. "They communicate with chemicals and sounds too low for humans to hear without special equipment. When a cub is scared, it sends out fear signals. When a cub is hurt, it sends out pain signals. And when a cub is happy, it sends out safety signals." Dan changed the image on the screen. Now it showed wavy lines like a heartbeat monitor. "Our cubs are sending out signals that Vraken cubs have never sent before. They are broadcasting happiness. They are telling every cub within range that humans are safe, that humans are kind, that there is a better way to live than constant fighting and pain." The room went quiet. Kyle tried to process what Dan was saying. "So the Vraken commanders retreat because their own weapons are getting messages that make them not want to fight?" "Exactly," Dan said. "The cubs have a critical period when they are young. During this time, they learn who to trust and who to fear. The Vraken use pain and violence during this period to make the cubs aggressive. But the cubs are designed by nature to want safety and care. When they get signals from our cubs that humans provide safety and care, something clicks in their brains. They start to question their training. Some of them refuse orders. Some of them just freeze up. And the Vraken commanders know this, so they retreat before their weapons become useless." Grace shook her head in amazement. "We are winning battles through kindness. That is the strangest thing I have ever heard." "War is strange," Dan said quietly, "but this might be the key to ending it. If we can show the Vraken cubs that they do not have to be weapons, maybe we can break the whole system." Kyle thought about this. The implications were huge. If Dan was right, humanity had accidentally discovered a form of warfare that the Vraken had no defense against. Not through bigger guns or faster ships, but through simple compassion. "How many more cubs can your program handle?" Kyle asked. Dan hesitated. "Right now, maybe 20 more. We are at capacity. We need more facilities, more handlers, more resources." "You will get them," Kyle decided. "I am going to recommend to Admiral Cross that we expand the handler corps immediately. If this is really working, we need to scale it up fast." "There is one more thing you should know," Dan said. His expression turned serious. "If we keep doing this, the Vraken leadership will eventually respond with force. Right now, they are just retreating. But when they realize we are not just capturing cubs, we are converting them, they will see us as a threat to their entire society. They will come after us with everything they have." Kyle nodded slowly. He understood. This was not just a military tactic. It was a challenge to the Vraken way of life. And people did not give up their way of life without a fight. "Then we better be ready," Kyle said. "Because we are not going to stop. If treating these cubs with basic decency is enough to make them refuse to fight, then the Vraken system deserves to fall." Dan smiled. And this time it was a real smile. "I was hoping you would say that, sir." As Dan left the command center, Kyle turned back to the screen. He looked at the image of Zephyr, the Vraken cub who had learned to trust humans. The creature looked calm and healthy. Its scales were bright and clean. Its eyes were clear and alert. Kyle thought about all the combat cubs he had seen in battle. They always looked sick and scared, even when they were attacking. Their scales were dull. Their eyes were wild with fear and anger. They fought not because they wanted to, but because they knew nothing else. Admiral Patricia Cross called an emergency meeting at Haven's Gate. the big space station that served as military headquarters. Around the conference table sat the most important people in the human military. There were generals, scientists, and officers from the Handler Corps. Patricia was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She had fought in 3 wars before this one. She did not waste time on small talk. "Show them what you showed me," Patricia said to Dan Cooper. The lights went down. A holographic video appeared in the center of the table. It showed a Vrakan cub sitting calmly on a metal floor. The cub was about the size of a big dog, with scales that changed color from gray to green. A human woman in a blue handler uniform knelt beside it. "This is Zephyr," Dan explained. "The woman is Lisa Yang, his handler. We captured Zephyr during a raid 8 months ago. He was 3 weeks old. The Vrakan had already started training him for combat. Their training uses electric shocks, starvation, and exposure to violence. By 3 weeks old, most Vrakan cubs will attack anything that moves." In the video, Lisa spoke softly to the cub. Her hands moved slowly as she checked the cub's body for injuries. She offered it a chunk of gray protein, the same food the Vrakan used but made fresh instead of rotten. The cub's scales gradually changed to a warm orange color. "Zephyr did not attack Lisa," Dan continued. "On his first day with us, he tried to bite her once. She did not hit him or shock him. She just stepped back and waited. Then she offered him food again. He was so hungry that he took it. That was the beginning. One cub learning tricks does not explain why entire fleets are running from us," said Colonel Frank Bishop. He was an older man with a gray beard and scars on his face. He had fought the Vrakan in ground battles and did not trust them. "You are right," Dan agreed. "One cub is just an interesting story. But we have 47 cubs now. Every single one has learned to trust humans. Every single one is performing better than Vrakan-trained cubs in every measure we can test. Strength, speed, intelligence, problem-solving. Our cubs beat theirs in everything." He changed the holographic display. Now it showed 2 cubs side by side. One looked sick and mean with dull scales and wild eyes. The other looked healthy and calm with bright scales and alert eyes. "The cub on the left is a Vrakan combat cub at 6 months old," Dan said. "The cub on the right is one of ours at the same age. Same genetics, same species, but completely different results. The difference is how they are treated." A woman in a white coat stood up. Her name was Dr. Helen Price, and she was the chief scientist studying the cubs. "The key is in how the cubs communicate," she said. "May I?" Dan nodded and stepped aside. Helen touched the controls, and the display changed to show colorful wave patterns. Vrakan cubs use a combination of chemical signals and subsonic sounds to communicate, Helen explained. When they are scared, they release fear chemicals. When they are in pain, they make low sounds that other cubs can hear. This happens automatically. They cannot control it. So they are always talking to each other, Patricia said. "Exactly," Helen confirmed. "In a normal Vrakan breeding facility, the cubs are constantly exposed to fear and pain signals from other cubs. This keeps them aggressive and on edge. But our cubs are different. They are healthy and well-fed. They feel safe. So they broadcast safety signals." Frank Bishop crossed his arms. "And you think enemy cubs are hearing these safety signals during battle?" "We know they are," Helen said. She changed the display again. This time it showed a recording from the Kepler station battle. "Watch this carefully. See these spikes in the subsonic readings? That is our cubs broadcasting from the transport ship. Now watch what happens to the enemy cubs." In the video, the attacking Vrakan cubs suddenly stopped moving. They looked around, confused. Some of them sat down. Others backed away from the human defenders they had been attacking. They heard something they had never heard before, Helen said. They heard that safety was possible. That not all adults would hurt them. For young cubs in their critical imprinting period, this is incredibly powerful. It triggers instincts deeper than their training. "Instincts?" asked General Martin Clay, a tall man who ran the space fleet. Helen nodded. "Think about young animals on Earth, puppies, kittens, even human babies. They are programmed by evolution to seek out safe adults, to find someone who will protect and feed them. The Vrakan cubs have the same programming. But the Vrakan Empire has spent generations trying to breed it out and train it out. They have not succeeded. They have just suppressed it. When our cubs broadcast safety signals, it wakes up something in the enemy cubs, something that makes them want to find the source of that safety instead of fighting." The room was silent as everyone absorbed this information. Finally, Patricia spoke. "So we have accidentally created a form of psychological warfare. We are turning the enemy's weapons against them, not through force but through kindness. That is one way to put it, Dan said. But I do not think it was an accident. Some of us knew what we were doing. We just did not know it would work this well. Frank Bishop still looked doubtful. This all sounds good, but it is based on 47 cubs. That is a tiny sample size. How do we know this will keep working? Before anyone could answer, a young officer rushed into the room. He looked excited and nervous. Admiral Cross, we have an emergency transmission. A Vrakan ship is requesting asylum. Everyone sat up straight. Patricia's eyes narrowed. What kind of ship? A breeding ship, ma'am. They say they have over 300 cubs on board. They are being chased by Vrakan military ships. They want our protection. The room erupted in conversation. Patricia held up her hand for silence. Is this verified? We are running checks now, the officer said. But the biometric signatures match a Vrakan caretaker vessel. The message is genuine as far as we can tell. Patricia looked at Dan. Caretakers. That is what you called them, right? The Vrakan who actually raised the cubs? Dan nodded, his face pale. Yes, caretakers are low-rank Vrakan. They are treated like slaves. They do all the dirty work of raising cubs, but they have no power. If a caretaker is requesting asylum, something big has happened. Could be a trap, Frank Bishop warned. Everything is a trap until we prove it is not, Patricia said. She stood up. Get me full sensor data on that ship. I want to know exactly what we are dealing with. Dan, you come with me. If this is real, we will need your expertise. 6 hours later, the Vrakan ship limped into the docking bay at Haven's Gate. The ship was called the Korthval, and it looked terrible. Burn marks covered its hull. Atmosphere leaked from multiple holes. The engines barely worked. Kyle Morrison had flown in from the Celestial Dawn to see this himself. He stood with Dan, Patricia, and a security team as the docking clamps locked the ship in place. Everyone was tense. Weapons were ready but not raised. The airlock opened with a hiss. 3 Vrakan stepped out. They were smaller than the warriors humans usually fought. Their scales looked dull and damaged. One of them had a broken arm that had not been treated properly. The lead Vrakan, a female, immediately dropped into a low crouch. Her head touched the floor. Dan had seen this gesture before during his captivity. It was a sign of submission used by low-rank Vrakan when approaching their superiors. Rise, Dan said in the Vrakan language. It was one of the few phrases he had learned. You are not prisoners here. The female Vrakan slowly stood up. Her yellow eyes were wide with fear and exhaustion. My name is Thessa. I am caretaker 7th rank of the Korthval. We carry 317 cubs. They are sick. They need help, please. Her English was rough but understandable. Patricia stepped forward. Why did you run from your own people? Thessa's scales darkened with emotion. New orders came from Dominion Command. Accelerated conditioning program. Start pain training at 1 week instead of 3 weeks. Expected mortality rate 50%. We were told this is necessary because human handlers are corrupting older cubs, making them weak, making them refuse to fight. And you disagreed with these orders, Patricia said. We could not do it, Thessa said, her voice shaking. Could not watch half the cubs die in first month. Could not start torture on newborns. So we took the ship and ran. Now Dominion fleet hunts us. They will kill us all if they catch us, but we will not go back. We will not kill cubs for empire that sees them as bullets. Dan felt a surge of emotion. These Vrakan had risked everything to protect their cubs. Let us see them, he said gently. Let us help. The next 12 hours were chaos. The cubs were in bad shape. They were too thin, dehydrated, and many were sick. But as human handlers moved through the cargo bays with food, water, and medicine, something amazing happened. The cubs started making a sound. It was too low for most humans to hear, but the sensitive equipment picked it up. It was a vibration that made the walls hum. Dr. Helen Price stood in the middle of the largest cargo bay with tears on her face. It is a comfort song, she said to Kyle, who had come to observe. Cubs make this sound when they feel safe with their caretakers. The Vrakan military has been trying to breed this behavior out for generations because it shows weakness. These babies are singing because maybe for the first time in their 3 weeks after the Korthval arrived, Haven's Gate had transformed into something nobody expected. The military station now housed over 800 Vrakan cubs and 53 Vrakan caretakers. The Handler Corps had grown from 40 people to 200, with more arriving every day. Dan Cooper barely slept anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw more ships arriving, more cubs needing help, More caretakers risking their lives to escape the Dominion. The scale of what was happening kept him awake at night. He was in the main nursery bay when Lisa Yang found him. She looked worried. "Dan, you need to see this," she said. "Thessa wants to talk to you. She says it is urgent." Dan followed Lisa to a small conference room. Thessa waited inside with two other Vrakan caretakers. All three looked nervous, their scales shifting through anxious colors. "Commander Cooper," Thessa began. She had learned to use human titles. "We have made contact with others. Other caretakers. There is network. Underground communication. They want to know if your protection offer is real." "Of course it is real," Dan said, sitting down. "Every caretaker and cub who wants asylum will get it. We promise that." "Words are easy," said one of the other Vrakan, a male named Rekar. "Dominion makes promises too, then breaks them. Caretakers need proof, need to see that cubs are truly safe here, need to see that you will not use cubs as weapons against Dominion." Dan understood. Trust had to be earned. "What kind of proof do they need?" "Let us show them," Thessa said. "Let us broadcast what is happening here. Show them the cubs singing comfort songs. Show them the medical care. Show them that handlers treat cubs with gentleness. If caretakers can see this, many will come. Broadcasting our location and activities would be a security risk," Lisa pointed out. "The Dominion could use that information to attack us." "Dominion already knows where you are," Rekar said. "They are watching. They are planning. Broadcasting or not broadcasting makes no difference to that. But if you broadcast, you give hope. Hope is a powerful weapon against empire built on fear." Dan thought about this. It was risky, but Rekar was right about one thing. The Dominion was coming eventually. Maybe giving hope to potential defectors was worth the risk. "I will talk to Admiral Cross," Dan said. "But I need to understand something first. How many caretakers are we talking about? How many might defect if they see proof?" The three Vrakan exchanged glances. Finally, Thessa spoke. "Network has contact with 417 breeding facilities. Each facility has message codes, secret ways to communicate. If we broadcast and even half believe, you could see 200 ships. Maybe 10,000 cubs, maybe more." Lisa whistled softly. "That is an invasion, but in reverse." "That is exactly what it is," Dan agreed. "And we need to be ready for it." 2 days later, Admiral Patricia Cross approved the broadcast plan. But she added conditions. The broadcast would not show the station's exact location. It would not show defensive capabilities or ship numbers. It would only show the cubs and their care. Dr. Helen Price set up the recording equipment in the largest nursery bay. The bay was clean and bright with soft lighting that did not hurt the cubs' sensitive eyes. Each cub had its own sleeping area with blankets and toys. Food and water stations were placed throughout the bay. Human handlers moved among the cubs, playing with them, checking their health, teaching them simple commands. The recording lasted 30 minutes. It showed Lisa Yang working with Zephyr, who is now fully grown and helped train younger cubs. It showed human handlers feeding tiny newborn cubs with bottles. It showed a Vrakan caretaker working alongside humans, her scales bright with happiness instead of dull with fear. And throughout the recording, the comfort song vibrated in the background, the sound of cubs who felt safe for the first time in their lives. At the end of the recording, Dan spoke directly to the camera. He used both English and the little Vrakan language he knew. "My name is Dan Cooper. I was a prisoner at Facility Korthmal. I know what the breeding facilities are like. I know the fear you feel every day. I know you are tired of watching cubs die. I am here to tell you that there is another way. We are not perfect. We are still learning. But we promise this. Every cub and every caretaker who comes to us will be treated with dignity and care. You will be safe here. The cubs will be safe here. This is not a trick. This is not a trap. This is an offer of freedom. If you want it, we are ready." Thessa encoded the message using Dominion communication protocols that only caretakers would recognize. Then she sent it out on a dozen different frequencies, bouncing it off relay stations across 3 star systems. Within hours, the message reached the underground network. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The first ship arrived the next day. It was a small transport carrying 37 cubs and 4 caretakers. The caretakers were terrified, convinced they would be captured and punished. When they saw the clean facilities and the healthy cubs singing comfort songs, one of them collapsed in relief. The second ship arrived 6 hours later, then a third, then 5 more within the next day. Each ship brought cubs, caretakers, and stories of escape. Some had fought their way out of Dominion facilities. Others had stolen ships in the middle of the night. All of them had seen the broadcast and decided to risk everything for a chance at a better life. Kyle Morrison stood in the command center, watching the board light up with new arrivals. Each ship had to be scanned, verified, and guided to docking. The station was running out of space. "We need more facilities," he said to Patricia, who stood beside him. "We are at maximum capacity and more ships are coming." "I know," Patricia said calmly. "I have authorized the construction of 3 more stations, and I have requested that Earth send every available handler and veterinarian. We are turning this into the largest rescue operation in human history." "The Dominion will not allow this to continue," Kyle warned. "No, they will not," Patricia agreed. "But every day we delay them is another day for more cubs to escape. Every cub we save is one less weapon they can use against us. We are not just saving lives, Kyle. We are dismantling their war machine one child at a time." By the end of the first week, Haven's Gate and 2 newly constructed stations housed over 3,000 cubs and 200 caretakers. The Handler Corps had grown to 500 people. Medical supplies were running low. Food production was at maximum. Every available space had been converted into nursery areas, but the cubs were thriving. With proper food, clean water, medical care, and gentle handling, they grew faster and healthier than Dominion-raised cubs ever did. More importantly, they were learning things Dominion cubs never learned. They were learning to play. They were learning to trust. They were learning that the world could be safe instead of scary. Dan stood in one of the nursery bays watching a group of month-old cubs chase each other around in a game. Their scales flashed with happy colors. Their movements were quick but not aggressive. They were just being children. Thessa approached him, her scales showing proud green.
"Network is spreading."
"More facilities are making contact. But there is problem." "What problem?" Dan asked, though he suspected he knew. "Dominion is cracking down. They have discovered some of the communication codes. 3 facilities have been raided, caretakers arrested, cubs destroyed. They are making examples, trying to scare others into obedience." Dan felt sick. "How many cubs were killed?" "Reports say over 500, Thessa said quietly.
"All under 1 month old."
Dominion claimed they were contaminated by human influence, had to be purged. Dan had to lean against the wall. 500 cubs, 500 children killed because the Dominion was afraid of losing control. "We need to move faster," he said. "We need to evacuate as many facilities as possible before the Dominion can stop us." "That is what Network is trying to do," Thessa said. "But we need help. Dominion is watching known routes. They are setting traps. Caretakers need escort ships. They need safe routes. They need coordinates for pickup points." "I will talk to Admiral Cross," Dan promised. "We will figure something out." That night, Patricia called another emergency meeting. The room was packed with officers, handlers, and Vraken caretakers. Patricia stood at the head of the table, her expression serious. "The situation has changed," she said. "The Dominion is actively hunting refugee ships. They have destroyed 2 transports in the past 3 days. Over 200 cubs and 20 caretakers were killed. We cannot let this continue." "What are you proposing?" asked Colonel Frank Bishop. "Active rescue operations," Patricia said. "We send military escorts to meet refugee ships at designated points. We provide protection during transit. We make it clear to the Dominion that attacking refugee ships means attacking human military vessels." "That is an act of war," Frank said. "We are already at war," Patricia reminded him. "But yes, this escalates things. The Dominion will respond. They will send their fleets. They will try to stop us by force. Then we will fight," Kyle said firmly. "We did not start this to give up halfway. Every cub we save is worth fighting for." Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. Even Frank Bishop, who had been skeptical about the Handler Corps from the beginning, was on board now. He had visited the nursery base. He had seen the cubs singing. He had watched the transformation of creatures bred to be monsters into children who could play and trust. It had changed his mind about what was worth fighting for. The Dominion fleet was 3 days away from Haven's Gate. Everyone knew it was coming. Sensors had tracked the massive gathering of ships as they assembled at the edge of Dominion territory. 60 warships, 12 breeding carriers that still held thousands of combat cubs, and support vessels loaded with weapons and troops. Commander Kyle Morrison stood in the command center of Unity Station, the new name for what had been Haven's Gate. The name change had been Lisa Yang's idea. She said that unity was what they were fighting for now. Unity between species, unity between former enemies, unity in the belief that children deserved better than being treated as weapons. Kyle liked the name. But names would not stop the fleet bearing down on them. "Status report," he said to Grace Hamilton, who managed the tactical displays. "All civilian transports have been evacuated," Grace reported. "The 3 secondary stations have been loaded with refugees and moved to fallback positions. We have 42 combat ships in defensive positions around Unity Station. Another 18 are on patrol routes providing escort for the last refugee ships." "How many Cubs are still on the station?" Kyle asked. 2,300, Grace said, "plus 400 caretakers and support staff. Admiral Cross wants them evacuated, but Dan says moving them now would cause more harm than good. Many of the Cubs are sick or injured. The stress of another transport could kill them." Kyle nodded. He had argued with Patricia about this yesterday. She wanted the station cleared of all non-military personnel. But Dan had been firm. The Cubs could not be moved again so soon. Some were too young, only days old. Others were recovering from injuries or illness. Loading them onto ships and jumping through space would put them at risk, so they stayed. And that meant the station was now full of vulnerable lives that needed protection. "Where is Dan now?" Kyle asked. "In the nursery bays," Grace said. "Where else?" Kyle made his way through the station corridors. Everywhere he looked, people were preparing. Weapons were being checked. Shields were being tested. Supply lines were being secured. But in the nursery sections, a different kind of preparation was happening. He found Dan in Bay 7, working with a group of handlers to reinforce the walls. The bay had been an equipment storage area before being converted into emergency nursery space. Now it held over 300 cubs ranging from newborns to 6-month-olds. "Will that help if the station is hit?" Kyle asked, gesturing at the reinforcement work. Dan looked up. His face was tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Probably not, but it makes me feel like I am doing something useful." "You are doing something useful," Kyle said. "You started this whole thing. None of these cubs would be alive without you. And none of them will stay alive if we lose this battle," Dan said quietly. He set down his tools and walked over to where Kyle stood. "I know what you are going to say. That we have a good chance. That our ships are better. That our people are prepared. But Kyle, there are 60 Dominion warships coming. We have 42. The math is not good." "Math is not everything," Kyle said. "We have something they do not." "What is that?" "We have a reason to fight that goes beyond following orders," Kyle said. "Every person on this station knows what we are protecting. Every handler, every soldier, every technician. They have seen the cubs. They have watched them transform from scared, aggressive creatures into children who can play and trust. They know what is at stake. That is worth more than 10 extra ships." Dan wanted to believe that. But he had also seen what Dominion weapons could do. He had lived in their facilities. He knew how ruthless they could be. "I am scared," Dan admitted. "I have been scared before during the war, during my time as a prisoner. But this is different. This time I am scared for them." He gestured at the cubs sleeping in their pens, scales shifting through peaceful colors as they dreamed. "That is what makes you a good handler," Kyle said. "Fear means you care. And caring is what this whole thing is about." Before Dan could respond, an alarm sounded. Not the battle station's alarm, but a communication alert. Kyle's earpiece activated. "Commander Morrison, we have an incoming transmission," the communications officer said. "It is from Thessa. She says it is urgent." Kyle and Dan rushed back to the command center. Thessa was already on the main screen, her scales showing agitated patterns. Behind her, Rekar and 3 other caretakers looked equally disturbed. "Commander, we have received message from network," Thessa said without preamble. "There has been development." "Big development? What kind of development?" Kyle asked. 14 more breeding facilities have made contact. They want to defect. All of them. Over 5,000 cubs total. But that is not the important part. "What is the important part?" 3 military units have also made contact," Thessa said. Her scales shifted to colors Kyle had never seen before. Something between hope and disbelief. "Not caretakers, warriors, low-rank warriors who were forced into military service. They say they are tired of fighting for empire that murders children. They want to help defend refugees." The command center went silent. Kyle felt his heart racing. Vraken warriors want to defect? 3 units, Thessa confirmed. Approximately 400 warriors total. They are requesting coordinates for rendezvous. They want to fight alongside humans when Dominion fleet arrives. Kyle looked at Grace, then at Dan. This changed everything. Not because 400 warriors would tip the balance in the battle, though they would help, but because it meant the cracks in the Dominion went deeper than anyone had realized. This could be a trap, Grace warned. Could be, Thessa agreed, but I do not think so. These units are low rank, conscripts, not volunteers. They have been watching what happens to cubs who refuse orders. They have seen executions. They have been ordered to kill cubs who were contaminated by human influence. Some refused and were punished. They are angry. They want out. Can we verify their identities? Kyle asked. Network is checking now, Thessa said, but verification takes time. You need to decide if you will take the risk. Kyle thought about it. 400 warriors would be a significant addition to their forces, but if it was a trap, if those warriors were still loyal to the Dominion, they could sabotage the defenses from inside. What do you think? He asked Dan. Dan considered carefully. I think the Dominion has been holding their empire together through fear and brutality for a long time. But fear only works if people believe there is no alternative. We have shown there is an alternative. That has to be terrifying for the Dominion leadership, because once people see another option, once they understand that rebellion is possible, the whole system starts to crack. That is not an answer, Kyle said. My answer is yes, Dan said. We take the risk. We give them the coordinates. Because if they are genuine, turning them away would be the cruelest thing we could do. They would be executed for even making contact with us. And if they are not genuine, if it is a trap, we will deal with it. But I think they are real. I think we are witnessing the beginning of something bigger than this battle. Kyle made his decision. Thessa, send them the coordinates. But have them rendezvous with one of our patrol groups first, not here. We will verify their intentions before bringing them to the main station. Understood, Thessa said. There is one more thing. The warrior units are not the only ones watching. Our network estimates that over 30% of Dominion forces are low-rank conscripts or slaves. If we win this battle, if we show that rebellion can succeed, the floodgates might open. We could see mass defections. And if we lose? Grace asked. Thessa's scales darkened. If you lose, the Dominion will make example. They will execute every cub, every caretaker, every defector. They will broadcast it across their empire. They will use your failure to prove that resistance is hopeless. So you cannot lose. Too much depends on this. After the transmission ended, Kyle stood looking at the tactical display. The pressure was enormous. This was not just a battle for Unity Station. It was a battle for the future of thousands, maybe millions, of Vraken who were waiting to see if freedom was really possible. We need to address the station, Kyle said to Grace. Everyone needs to understand what is at stake. An hour later, every screen on Unity Station showed Kyle's face. Behind him stood Admiral Patricia Cross, Dan Cooper, and Thessa representing the caretakers. People of Unity Station, Kyle began. In less than 3 days, a Dominion fleet will arrive here. Their goal is to destroy this station, kill the refugees we protect, and prove that resistance against their empire is futile. They want to send a message that compassion is weakness and that their way is the only way. He paused, letting that sink in. But we are going to send a different message. We are going to show them that protecting the innocent is the strongest thing anyone can do. We are going to prove that an empire built on fear and cruelty cannot stand against people who fight for something they believe in. On the screens throughout the station, in nursery bays and weapons rooms and sleeping quarters, people stopped what they were doing to listen. I will not lie to you, Kyle continued. This battle will be hard. We are outnumbered. Many of us may not survive. But I want you to remember why we are here. Walk through the nursery bays. Look at the cubs we have saved. Listen to their... The Dominion fleet arrived exactly when sensors predicted. 60 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Unity Station defense zone. The massive vessels hung in space like a wall of metal and weapons, blocking out the stars. Commander Kyle Morrison stood in the command center, watching the enemy fleet on the main display. His hands were steady, but his heart raced. Beside him, Admiral Patricia Cross studied the tactical data with calm focus. Grace Hamilton coordinated defensive positions from her station, and in the corner, Dan Cooper watched with Thessa and two other caretakers who had insisted on being present. "Open a channel to the Dominion flagship," Patricia ordered. The main screen split. Half showed the enemy fleet. The other half showed a massive Vrakan warrior. His scales were covered in scars that marked his rank in battles. His eyes were cold and hard. "I am War Commander Vokath of the Dominion fleet," the warrior said. "You harbor stolen property. You have corrupted our breeding stock. You have turned our own servants against us. For these crimes, your station will be destroyed. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift. Resist and we will make you suffer before you die." Patricia's expression did not change. "I am Admiral Patricia Cross of the Human Defense Force. The cubs and caretakers here are refugees, not property. They came to us seeking safety from your brutality. We will not surrender them to you." Vokath's scales darkened with anger. "You speak of brutality while stealing children from their rightful owners. The cubs belong to the Dominion. They are bred for war. That is their purpose. You have made them weak with your softness. We have made them healthy," Dan said, stepping forward so Vokath could see him. "We have shown them that life can be more than pain and fear. And that terrifies you, does it not? Because if cubs can choose kindness over cruelty, your entire empire falls apart." Vokath leaned forward, recognizing Dan. "The soft one from Korthmal. You should have died in that facility. Instead, you have corrupted thousands of our young. Today, you will pay for that crime with your life, and every cub you have touched will be destroyed. Their weakness will be purged. The natural order will be restored." "There is nothing natural about torturing children," Dan said firmly. "And we will not let you take them. Then you will die protecting them," Vokath said. "And when you are dead, we will kill them anyway. Your sacrifice means nothing." The transmission ended. The Dominion fleet began to advance. "All ships prepare for engagement," Patricia ordered. "Execute defense pattern Unity 7. The human ships moved into position. 42 vessels against 60. The math was bad, but the human ships were newer and more maneuverable. The plan was to use speed and precision against the Dominion's superior numbers, but Kyle knew that might not be enough. He watched the tactical display, calculating odds, planning contingencies. Then something appeared on the sensors that made him catch his breath. "Admiral, we have new contacts," Grace reported. "Multiple ships entering the defense zone. They are broadcasting human identification codes, but the ship signatures are Vrakan." Everyone turned to look at the display. 14 new ships had appeared, smaller than the Dominion warships but still armed. And behind them, 3 transport vessels carrying the defector warriors. "This is caretaker leader Mevra of the Free Vrakan," a voice said over the communication channel. "We bring 14 vessels and 400 warriors. We stand with Unity Station. We stand against the Dominion." Thessa's scales flashed bright with joy. "They came. I hoped, but I did not dare believe. They came." Kyle looked at Patricia. She smiled grimly. "Well, the math just got a little better. Contact Mevra. Get those ships integrated into our defense pattern." The Dominion fleet hesitated. Kyle could imagine the confusion on Vokath's flagship. The Dominion had expected to face only humans. Now their own people were fighting against them. "All forces, this is Unity Station Command," Kyle broadcast on all channels. "The Dominion fleet has come to destroy the cubs we protect. They have come to kill the caretakers who chose freedom. They have come to prove that resistance is hopeless. Let us show them they are wrong. Let us show them that when people stand together for what is right, no force in the universe can defeat them. Hold the line. Protect the station. And remember what we fight for." The battle began. The Dominion fleet opened fire first, launching massive energy weapons toward Unity Station. The station's shields flared bright as they absorbed the impact. Human ships moved in, targeting the Dominion vessels' weapon systems with precise strikes. The Free Vrakan ships flanked from the sides, using their knowledge of Dominion ship weaknesses to devastating effect. But the Dominion had one weapon that humanity had not fully prepared for. The 12 breeding carriers released their combat cubs, thousands of them, launched into space in armored pods. The pods were designed to latch onto enemy ships and stations, allowing the cubs to tear through hulls with their claws. "Cubs incoming," Grace reported. "Over 3,000 combat units. They are targeting the station and our ships." Kyle's stomach dropped. Even with all their preparation, facing thousands of enemy cubs was terrifying. These cubs had been raised in the old way, conditioned through pain and fear. They would attack without mercy, But then something happened that no one expected. As the combat cubs approached Unity Station, they began to detect the signals from the cubs inside. The comfort songs that had been playing constantly in the nursery bays were being broadcast through the station's external speakers. Dr. Helen Price had suggested it as a way to keep the cubs calm during the battle. Now it served a different purpose. The approaching combat cubs slowed. Their pods stopped moving toward the station. On sensors, the biological readings showed confusion. The cubs inside were receiving signals they had never encountered before. Safety signals. Happiness signals. The sound of cubs who were not afraid. In the command center, Dan watched the readings with growing hope. "They are hearing it," he whispered. "They are hearing the comfort songs." Tessa moved to the communication panel. She activated a special frequency, one that only caretakers knew. She began broadcasting in Vraken, speaking directly to the combat cubs in a way that touched something deep in their biology. "Little ones," she said, her voice gentle, "you do not have to fight. You do not have to be weapons. There is a place here where you will be safe, where you will be fed, where no one will hurt you. Come to us. Choose life over death. Choose safety over pain." On the sensors, something remarkable happened. The combat cubs began changing direction. Not all of them, but dozens, then hundreds. Their pods turned toward the station, but not to attack. They were approaching slowly, cautiously, like scared children approaching a safe adult for the first time. "Open the emergency bays," Dan said urgently. "Let them in. We have to let them in." Kyle hesitated for only a second. Then he gave the order. "Open bays 14 through 20. Emergency handler teams stand by to receive incoming cubs. Be careful, some may still be aggressive." Throughout Unity Station, handlers rushed to the emergency bays. As the first pods arrived and opened, they found cubs inside who looked terrified and confused. Some tried to attack, acting on their training. But the handlers were ready, using calm voices and gentle movements, offering food and water instead of violence. More cubs came. The stream became a flood. Over 1,000 combat cubs defected in the first 10 minutes of battle, abandoning the Dominion to seek the safety they heard in the comfort songs. On the Dominion flagship, Voketh watched in horror as his primary weapons turned against him. "Fire on the defecting pods," he ordered. "Destroy them. We cannot allow this corruption to spread." Dominion ships began firing on their own cubs. Energy weapons destroyed pods filled with confused young creatures who were just trying to find safety. The sight was horrible, but it revealed something important. The Dominion was willing to kill its own cubs rather than lose control of them. "Target those ships first," Patricia ordered, her voice cold with fury. "Any Dominion vessel that fires on cubs is priority 1. Destroy them, human and free." Vraken's ships focused their fire on the vessels attacking the defecting cubs. 3 Dominion ships were destroyed in rapid succession. The others stopped firing on the cubs and returned to fighting the actual enemy forces. But the damage was done. The remaining combat cubs, seeing the Dominion destroy their own, made their choice. Over 2,000 cubs defected in total. The Dominion's main weapon had turned into a rescue operation that strained Unity Station's resources, but dealt a devastating blow to enemy morale. The space battle raged for 3 hours. Ships on both sides took damage. 2 human vessels were destroyed. 3 Free Vraken ships were crippled. But the Dominion lost 8 warships, and their breeding carriers were left defenseless after releasing all their cubs. Kyle watched the tactical display, looking for any advantage. The numbers were still against them, but the momentum had shifted. The Dominion fleet was in disarray, confused by the mass defection of their combat cubs. Then the sensors picked up something new. More ships were arriving, dozens of them, all broadcasting emergency signals. "We are reading 47 new contacts," Grace reported, her voice showing disbelief. "They are Vraken vessels, caretaker ships mostly. They are requesting immediate protection." On the communication channels, dozens of voices see.